here and you marry 4 or 5 women and you outbreed us. You change the laws. You make all of our country look like the places that you fled from. We don't want you here. Respectfully, get the fuck out of my country. I don't want you here. Get out of here. I don't want you here. I don't want you here. This is our country. And the people, the veterans, the World War II veterans, that's blood has soaked for our constitutional republic, are taking a look around Europe. They're taking a look around America, and they're saying, what the hell did we fight for?
So as many of you have told me in the comments of my video on the Dearborn mayor saying that he's against assimilation and that Muslims should not have to do so, there was an incident in Dearborn, or maybe a series of incidents, some would even call them riots, and they were set off in part by a group showing up in order to give Dearborn, their city council, and their mayor a piece of their mind. And what you ended up seeing in the opening of this particular video was a guy that I'm not familiar with called Jake Lang going to the city council and telling the Muslims of Dearborn to get out of his country in very colorful and vulgar language. And this is what we're going to talk about today, because we had riots, we had craziness, we had the aftermath, and considering that the mayor of Dearborn said in the podcast interview that I criticized that everybody's afraid of America being like Dearborn because diversity works so well in Dearborn,
because they fear the idea that coexistence is working and it's successful. Where our mosques neighbor our churches.
Maybe those words did not age pretty well. Maybe you got married to that concept when it was far too young and definitely inappropriate, because just a few weeks after that particular interview, all hell broke loose in your city. And of course, there's all these allegations.
False allegations and not facts.
And of course, this has led to allegations of bias from the Dearborn police. So we are going to try to cover all of that as best as possible. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you to everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
This is absolutely insane. It's mayhem. The Muslims are allowed to do whatever they want with impunity. The officers haven't arrested any of them. There's been repeated assaults. I was Haley, your shoes are tied. I was bear sprayed or pepper sprayed, OC sprayed, whatever. Jake got sprayed. They didn't do anything. He just got punched in the face, and an officer watched it, did nothing. They're all masked up. They say go to the station later. If this isn't Sharia police, I don't know what is. They just watched Jake get hit in the head, did nothing. They gave him a punch him right in the face.
So look, obviously I gotta be 100% honest with you guys about every aspect of this story, and normally I would come out a little bit stronger against Mr. Jake Lang for coming to the Dearborn City Council and telling these people to get the hell out of his country, that they're not welcome here, but for the fact that the mayor told that to a citizen of Dearborn that he was not welcome here, and of course he has still not recanted that particular statement. And to make matters worse, as we talked about in my previous video, he's actually adding things and lying about it, pretending that the Christian person that he said was unwelcome in the city of Dearborn, by the way, his issue at the time was that the Christian person didn't want signs named after a journalist who called for violence in the United States of America, and of course that this Christian guy ends up proselytizing outside of his mosque. But suddenly on the podcast, he was saying that this guy was threatening his daughter.
Here's what I'll say about it. Okay. Understanding the sensitivities around it. In that moment, I think what people saw and heard was me speaking out as a father who was not going to stand by and watch my daughters be vilified because of their faith.
You did take your mayor hat off.
In many ways, yeah. I mean, it's not very common for me to respond that way. And, you know, this is an antagonist who's been doing this for years in the city of Dearborn.
Which again, I linked the entire exchange in the description of the video, and nothing could be further from the truth. So I'm going to give a little bit more latitude to Mr. Jake Lang, who obviously came to Dearborn to stir stuff up. But the fact is, you can be controversial, you can come to a place to stir up some kind of energy, but that does not justify the response that they received by the Muslim population in Dearborn. Now look, there are a lot of videos coming out from Dearborn from the night in question. In fact, I'm going to link you the entirety of Cam Higby's hour-and-a-half long stream from on the ground covering this if you want to check it out for yourself. But one of the key points of contention on that fateful night was the fact that Jake Lang actually was attempting to burn a Quran, again in a place where Muslims are the majority. Now, make no mistake about it, this is something that is intended to incite a reaction. That's why you do it. In fact, that's why people burn the American flag. However, with Muslims, obviously they find any disrespect to their religion completely beyond the pale, and this often results in violence. In fact, there is a famous UK case where somebody was burning the Quran, and then a Turkish individual pulled a knife and tried to stab him to death in response, and the guy who burned the Quran actually got a harsher sentence for hate speech, and they used the fact that somebody tried to murder him as evidence against him at his trial. So yeah, we've seen how this can go, but America has the First Amendment, and remember, even though the mayor is against assimilation, we are told very often that the Muslim population in Dearborn is totally not trying to enforce their religious attitudes from the third world in the United States of America. But of course, things went awry. Violence sparked. They were attacked for attempting to burn the Quran. The book was saved. And all of this is very interesting, especially when you see this very area has a bunch of protests where they burn the American flag.
They want to pepper spray our people. We'll show them what's up. Come burn it, man. You can burn it. It's America. Don't say you can burn it. It's America. Don't say you can burn it. Don't respect America. This is don't respect America. No.
And there's almost no reaction in comparison to that action against the United States of America. And this is because, spoiler alert, these people put Islam above the United States every single time. Make no mistake about it. They want to make America more like their homeland rather than assimilate into our homeland. And by the way, this is backed up fully by the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, who is against the idea of a melting pot and doesn't seem to understand that the melting pot is about melting down metals and forming something new and inseparable and stronger than before, and thinks it's related to soup.
But to me, it's like, I actually disavow the use of the term the melting pot. I actually don't like it. Why? Because in a melting pot, when you're talking about like a soup, everything looks the same.
Right.
We're the salad bowl. The lettuce is lettuce, the tomato is tomato, the cucumber is cucumber, and they all complement each other. Here in the city, we celebrate the unique cultures we have. We celebrate the unique faiths that we have. We celebrate the people that we have. We're not asking you to give up anything. It's as American, you are as American as anyone else, regardless of any of that. And I think that is what people fear.
Now, to be clear, the actions taken by Jake Lang and his group are done so to be incendiary. The reaction that they want is the reaction that they got, and everybody should understand this. But one of the things that I find incredibly troubling is that even though everybody should understand this, the Muslim population of Dearborn was still perfectly comfortable attacking people, threatening people, and doing all sorts of things in response to the Quran burning, even though it's obvious bait. This is because these people have no interest, a huge portion of them, in assimilating to American culture. They think that their religion is in fact supreme. So even though the bait was obvious, you basically had a giant sign saying don't take the bait. They all took the bait because they can't help themselves. And this actually ends up proving the point that was trying to be made about Muslims not being able to assimilate in the United States of America. Again, all the people had to do was go home and let these people do their goofy ass rally. Like, you know, when they have like the group of like 10 or 20 like neo-Nazi types and they're all in the masks or whatever, and they're out on the highway holding a sign. Nobody really like talks to them. They don't really associate with them. They don't get all that much attention. And guess what? They eventually move on with their day, having impacted nothing. Well, the Muslims basically gave these people all of the power and proved the truth of their words, while simultaneously they're telling everybody about how accepting and wonderful Dearborn is, and how it's totally not enforcing Islamic laws and traditions, as we see people lash out violently based on Islamic laws and tradition. Again, I didn't want this to be the case. I would have preferred the other outcome because that's a better sign for the country, but this is something that we we've seen time and time again. And again, the example that I gave, and I give often on this channel, is the Book of Mormon musical, which of course was written by Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the creators of South Park. That musical makes fun of every aspect of the Mormon religion. But what do Mormons do in response? They go outside where the musical is playing and try to recruit people to their faith. They actually pay for advertisements in the playbill of the Book of Mormon musical, recommending people actually check out the religion. They respond in a very peaceful way, in a way that shows that they can assimilate to American culture, but Muslims threaten to kill Matt Stone and Trey Parker over an episode about depicting Muhammad, the famous 201 and episode 200 controversy. Muslims killed Charlie Hebdo. They did a mass shooting at that location due to the fact that they depicted Muhammad. Salman Rushdie got stabbed in the eye when a Muslim tried to kill him over a book that he wrote decades ago about satanic verses in the Quran. So we see time and time again that these people are refusing to assimilate. Again, the British example that I gave earlier on, where somebody tried to stab somebody because they were burning the Quran in protest, something that is protected, would be protected if you were burning the British flag. But apparently in the UK, Muslims are the superior people and you're not allowed to do that. So again, the attempted murderer got less than the person who is exercising their freedom of speech. This is a huge problem that the Western world is going to have to engage with, specifically in Europe, as Muslims become an ever-increasing part of their population. And the fact is, it's that they're refusing to assimilate and in fact are trying to change the broader culture, and in Europe, they've become successful in doing so, however awful that might be. Now look, I know some people are going to disagree with me and probably write in the comments that Islam is incompatible with Western values, which is true. Islamic values are incompatible. They have an alternate system of law that conflicts with the basis of our system of law, but I genuinely don't care if somebody is religious. I don't care if they're Muslim. I don't care if they're Christian, Catholic, Jewish, Mormon. I don't care if they're Hindu or any of these different various faiths. I don't care if they're Buddhist. I don't even care if they're like the woke progressive, like kind of fake Buddhist that has become popular in certain parts of the country. As long as you get down with the overall ideas of the United States of America and understand the difference between your faith and what our Constitution says, and understand that our Constitution is the supreme law of this land, we got no issues. First Amendment, freedom of religion, freedom of association. If I don't want to be a part of your faith, no big deal, but you're not going to impinge on my rights, and I'm not going to watch you impinge on other people's rights to protest, even if you don't like that protest. This is the major problem with Muslim populations in the Western world. They do not get it. They don't get on board, and they play victim all the time and use terms like Islamophobia when they're in the minority. And they play on the tolerant nature of our values, but as their numbers tick up, as they get closer to a majority, what do? They start taking away your liberty because that's according to their values. We can't have it. No way at all whatsoever. Again, this isn't about hatred against people who happen to grow up Muslim or people who are Muslim but can act normally in the United States of America, which, by the way, is also another issue that I have with the mass importation of Islam into the Western world, because there's also no expectation for Muslims to act normally. Again, I play this Norm Macdonald clip all the time because it is very important for you to understand that he's speaking to a broader concept that is something that basically infects the Western world. And it's this idea that Muslims are always the victims, even if the topic is Islamic terror, them victimizing other people.
I can't say my friend's name, but he said his biggest fear is that ISIS or some terrorist group like that will get a hold of a dirty bomb and explode it over a major city within the United States and kill tens of millions of people. Because then the blowback against innocent Muslims would be absolutely terrible.
Yes, that's horrific.
That's true.
And how many times do we see this whenever there's an attack or whenever there's some kind of crime, or even in this particular instance where things got violent, but people were saying, well, they did come out to provoke with their speech and they did attempt to burn the Quran. So can you really expect Muslims to not be violent in response? And my answer to that question is yes. Not only do I expect it, I absolutely demand it, because that is a pillar of our civilization, that you don't get to strike out violently against speech that you don't like. The problem that we have with Muslims in the United States of America, and again, also true in Europe, is that they have the soft bigotry of no expectations. Nobody expects them to behave properly, and that somehow makes them immune from consequences. Like that guy who was threatening Matt Stone and Trey Parker that published their home address when they were trying to depict Muhammad, he should have been tossed out of this country. And by the way, if he was an immigrant, obviously denaturalized and deported. But if he wasn't an immigrant, I'm a fan of banishment, because he totally didn't get it. That was a violent threat. And you know what? If you're not going to boot him from the country, you should throw him in prison for, again, issuing a threat against artists because their art was something that he didn't like. Not on board with it. Don't support it. You shouldn't support it either. But again, this is the situation as it was portrayed at this particular event. Now, again, I will link to Cam Higby's channel, to his videos. He did excellent coverage of this. Cam Higby was not necessarily going down there to provoke everybody and cause the response, and he experienced violence. So I want you to check that out, get his perspective on this, an on-the-ground perspective. But overall, I want to know what you guys think about the Dearborn riots. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about madness in Dearborn. Till next time.